Welcome to Affair Confessions, where secrets, lies, and betrayals come to life. Get ready for thrilling stories that explore the dark side of love and temptation. Subscribe and let the story begin. Of all the men in the world, it had to be my brother-in-law. I didn't plan for it to happen, and I never expected the thrill of forbidden touches and secret glances to spiral into something I couldn't control. But once we crossed that line, there was no turning back. No matter the risk, no matter the cost. I swear, I never wanted to have an affair. Honestly, I don't think anyone truly sets out to have one. Most of us imagine our lives differently. We envision finding someone, falling in love, and spending the rest of our days in a beautiful, harmonious relationship. Having an affair means something has gone wrong, a sign that the life you planned has veered off course. I wanted the fairy tale. I dreamed of finding my Prince Charming, being swept off my feet, and spending the rest of my life blissfully happy. I imagined us dancing in the kitchen, laughing in the living room, and sharing those intimate moments in the bedroom that would keep our connection strong. I thought we'd grow old together, always joyful, hopeful, and committed, our bodies aging but our love remaining young, passionate, and alive. But reality doesn't work like that. The first few years with Tom were exactly what I had dreamed of. Better, even. He was everything I wanted. He was kind, attentive, and we had an electric chemistry that kept us close in every sense of the word. We'd find time for each other, no matter how busy life got. We talked, we shared our fantasies, and we explored them together. Sure, I had a slightly higher desire for intimacy than he did, but it never felt like a problem. Tom made me feel beautiful and wanted, even when I wasn't at my best. He'd compliment me in my most mundane moments, when I was in pajamas or doing housework. Those little gestures kept the spark alive. If it had stayed like that, I wouldn't be sitting here now, on this park bench, nervous, guilty, and excited as I wait for Jake to arrive. But it didn't stay like that. Over time, things changed. Slowly, almost imperceptibly at first, the magic began to fade. I'm not here to blame Tom. It's never just one person's fault when a marriage falters. It takes two to build a relationship, and it takes two to let it drift apart. Looking back, I can see how our lives began to shift in ways neither of us intended. It started with financial stress. We were never rich, but there was always just enough to get by. Until there wasn't. Bills piled up, and the weight of debt slowly grew. We began to argue about things we had never argued about before. Money, work, responsibilities. The stress changed us, turned us inward. Instead of working through our problems together, we each retreated into our own worlds. Then came the struggles with starting a family. We wanted children, desperately, but it just wasn't happening for us. What was once a joyful, intimate part of our relationship, our time together in bed, became goal-oriented and mechanical. We weren't connecting emotionally anymore. We were trying to achieve something. Intimacy became a chore, a task to be completed rather than an expression of love. I don't think either of us meant to place blame, but there was an unspoken tension that built up between us. 8 years into our marriage, we found ourselves childless and, as a result, in a nearly intimacy-free relationship. Our marriage had become something different than we had ever imagined. Why didn't we split up? It's a question I've asked myself countless times. Part of me thinks it's because, after you've fought so hard to make something work, it's difficult to walk away. There's a strange comfort in staying, even when things aren't perfect. Our life together wasn't terrible. It was nice even. We had our routines, our conversations over dinner, our quiet nights at home. The financial worries had lessened, and we were both doing well in our careers. And the love, well, it was still there. Not the intense, passionate kind we once had, but a quieter love, a deeper bond. It wasn't the fairy tale love I had dreamed of, but it was something. I still cared about Tom, deeply. He was a good man. But despite that, I couldn't ignore the growing emptiness in my life. There was a hole where intimacy used to be, and I felt it growing larger with each passing year. It wasn't just about physical desire. It was about feeling wanted, feeling seen as a woman. I craved that connection again, the feeling that I mattered in a deeper, more personal way. That's when I started seeking something more. I didn't want to destroy my marriage. I didn't want to hurt Tom, and I certainly didn't want to upend the life we had built together. But as I lay in bed night after night, thinking about what was missing, I realized I couldn't live the rest of my life feeling this way. I couldn't spend another 30 or 40 years without the intimacy I longed for. And so, after weeks of inner turmoil, rationalizing, and guilt, I made the decision. I was going to have an affair. That's when I met Jake. I had joined an online forum for people in what they called dead bedroom situations, relationships where intimacy had disappeared. It was a space where people could vent, share their frustrations, and talk openly about their struggles. At first, I was just an observer, reading other people's stories, quietly sympathizing. It felt wrong to admit that my marriage wasn't perfect, like I was betraying something sacred. But eventually, I began to participate. I shared my own thoughts, my own frustrations. There was something freeing about being honest, about talking to people who understood. I wasn't the only one feeling this way. That's when I came across a post from a user named All Lonely But Hopeful. His story was eerily similar to mine. He was 46, married, with no kids. His wife wasn't interested in intimacy anymore, but he still loved her. He didn't blame her. He just didn't understand why their connection had faded. His words resonated with me, and I decided to message him, just to let him know I understood how he felt. He responded, and soon we were messaging back and forth regularly. Our conversation started out innocent enough. We talked about our struggles, our marriages, and how we missed the closeness we once had. It didn't take long for me to realize that Jake lived nearby, and the thought of that filled me with a strange, guilty excitement. As the days passed, our conversations deepened. We began to share more about ourselves, opening up in ways that we hadn't been able to with our partners. There's something strange about confiding in a stranger. It's often easier to be honest with someone you don't know. You don't fear judgment or rejection in the same way. Then, one day, our conversations took a turn. What had started as emotional support became something more. We both admitted that we missed intimacy. We talked about what we longed for, what we had lost in our relationships. It felt safe, even thrilling to talk about these things with Jake. He understood me in a way I hadn't felt understood in years. It wasn't long before I jokingly suggested that maybe an affair was the solution to our problems. Jake didn't laugh it off. He agreed, and suddenly, the fantasy became real. We set some ground rules to keep things from spiraling out of control. We agreed this would remain an affair, nothing more. No one was leaving their marriage. We'd meet once a month at most, and always in a neutral place. Personal details would be kept to a minimum, and we'd respect each other's boundaries. The day we finally met in person, I was a ball of nerves. The plan was simple: meet at a small hotel, spend a few hours together, and part ways. Nothing complicated, nothing dramatic. But the moment I saw Jake standing there, waiting for me, a rush of excitement, fear, and guilt washed over me all at once. We didn't talk much as we walked inside. I couldn't trust my voice to say anything without betraying how nervous I was. Instead, we went straight up to the room. The silence wasn't uncomfortable. It was heavy with anticipation, with the knowledge of what was about to happen. Once inside the room, Jake turned to me, his eyes soft but serious. Are you sure? He asked, giving me one last chance to back out. I hesitated, but deep down, I knew I had already made my decision. I nodded. The first touch was electric, like a spark igniting something that had long been dormant within me. His hand on my back, his lips on mine. It was overwhelming. We moved quickly, as if we both knew this moment had been building for weeks. And now that it was here, there was no point in waiting any longer. As our clothes came off and we lay together, the intensity of it all consumed me. It wasn't just about the physical act. It was about feeling wanted again, feeling alive in a way I hadn't in years. Every touch, every kiss, every movement felt like a release, like I was finally giving in to something I had been holding back for far too long. And then, it happened, the moment I had craved for so long. It wasn't just about desire, it was about connection, about the sense of being seen, of being appreciated. As we lay together afterward, catching our breath, I realized that while this wouldn't fix everything, it had given me something I desperately needed. After that day, I thought I could stop. I thought I could go back to my life with Tom, satisfied with that one moment of escape, a secret memory I could carry with me to keep me going through the dull days. But it wasn't that simple. The sensation of being wanted, being touched, and being desired again had unlocked something within me, something I couldn't ignore. The adrenaline, the rush of being in a secret, forbidden relationship, made me feel alive in a way I hadn't in years. It was like a drug, one that I knew I shouldn't indulge in, but I couldn't resist. I told myself I wouldn't meet Jake again, that it was a one-time thing. But as the days went by, the urge to feel that connection again became overwhelming. I'd catch myself daydreaming at work, remembering how it felt to be touched like that, to have someone look at me with pure desire. At night, I'd lie awake next to Tom, my body aching with the memory of Jake's hands on me. I tried to ignore it, to push it away, but the longing kept building until I could no longer deny it. The next time I messaged Jake, it was with shaky hands, already knowing where it would lead. And before I knew it, we were arranging our next meeting. This time, the anticipation was even stronger. I wasn't just nervous. I was excited, almost giddy. The guilt still lingered, but it was drowned out by the thrill. When we met again, it felt like a floodgate had opened. The passion, the need. It was even more intense than before. I couldn't get enough of it. And so it became a cycle. We'd meet once a month, sometimes more, always in secret, always under the veil of our carefully crafted rules. Each time, I told myself it would be the last. Each time, I failed. But as I became more comfortable with my new double life, something strange started happening. I was addicted to the excitement, to the sense of escape. And when Jake couldn't meet, I found myself back on the forum, looking for others who were in similar situations. At first, it was just curiosity. I'd read posts from men who, like Jake, were in loveless marriages and craved connection. I started messaging a few of them, purely to chat, to see if their stories resonated with mine. It wasn't long before I was arranging to meet another man. His username was Seeking Something More, and our conversations had followed the same path as my chats with Jake. Innocent at first, then increasingly intimate. He was married too, in a similar situation, and we agreed to meet in a nearby town. When I walked into the hotel lobby and saw him sitting there, my heart stopped. The man sitting there wasn't just any stranger, it was Rob, Tom's brother. I felt a wave of panic wash over me. Rob was staring at his phone, completely unaware of me, but I froze, my mind racing. I had never suspected that Rob was struggling in his marriage. He and Megan had always seemed happy, or at least content. And now, here we were, about to meet for an affair. For a moment, I considered running. I could turn around, pretend I had never seen him, and leave it all behind. But then, as if he felt my presence, Rob looked up. Our eyes met, and the shock on his face mirrored my own. For a long, agonizing moment, we just stared at each other. Neither of us spoke. Neither of us moved. Finally, Rob stood up and walked over to me, his expression unreadable. "What are you doing here?" he asked, his voice low, as if he couldn't quite believe what he was seeing. I opened my mouth to speak, but no words came out. What could I say? How could I explain? In that instant, the weight of everything came crashing down on me. The affair, the lies, the secrets. I had been so consumed by my own needs, my own desires, that I hadn't even considered the consequences. And now, I was face to face with the one person who could unravel everything. But instead of walking away, something strange happened. We stood there for a long moment, both of us grappling with what to do next. And then, in a quiet voice, Rob said, "So, here we are." There was something in the way he said it that made me realize he wasn't going to walk away either. Maybe, just like me, Rob was too far down the rabbit hole. Maybe the thrill of the affair, the need for intimacy, was too much for him to resist. "Yeah," I finally whispered, my heart pounding in my chest. "Here we are." Neither of us said anything else. We didn't need to. The shared understanding between us was enough. We both knew this was wrong, so very wrong. But we were here, and it was too late to turn back. Rob glanced around the lobby, then nodded toward the elevator. Without another word, I followed him. As we rode up in silence, the weight of what we were about to do settled over us. The guilt was there, gnawing at the back of my mind. This wasn't just another affair. It was Rob, my brother-in-law, Tom's brother. But somehow, that only seemed to heighten the thrill. The taboo nature of it made my skin tingle with anticipation. We entered the hotel room, and for a brief second, I thought one of us might back out. But then Rob reached for me, pulling me close, and all my reservations melted away. The touch of his hands on my skin was electric, and as we undressed, all the confusion, all the guilt, faded into the background. What replaced it was pure, undeniable desire. The connection was immediate and overwhelming. For the next hour, nothing else existed but the two of us. The affair, the secrecy, the forbidden nature of it all, everything intensified the experience. It was exhilarating, intoxicating. Afterward, as we lay side by side, the weight of what we had done finally settled in. Neither of us spoke for a long time. There was no point in pretending this hadn't crossed a line we could never uncross. But we had done it. We couldn't change that now. Rob turned to me, his face unreadable. "What happens now?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "I don't know," I admitted. Because I didn't. This had been about fulfilling a need, about finding that missing connection. But now that we'd crossed this line, I had no idea what came next. All I knew was that just like with Jake, I wasn't sure I could stop. After that day with Rob, I thought things might end. But just like with Jake, the pull was too strong. What started as a forbidden thrill became an addiction, something neither of us could walk away from. The guilt was always there, but it became easier to ignore, buried beneath the excitement. Rob and I started meeting regularly. There was an unspoken agreement between us. We wouldn't talk about it outside of our meetings. We both had too much to lose. But every time he came over for family dinners or casual visits, the tension was unbearable. One night, we were sitting around the dining table, Tom, Rob, Megan, and me. Everyone was talking about work, life, the usual mundane things. But beneath the surface, something else was simmering. Rob kept stealing glances at me, and I could feel the heat rising in my cheeks. It was a dangerous game we were playing, flirting with disaster right under Tom's nose. At one point, I got up to grab something from the kitchen. Rob excused himself a moment later, saying he needed to make a call. In the hallway, where no one could see us, he brushed up against me, his hand grazing my waist as he passed. The touch sent a jolt of electricity through me, and for a split second I thought about grabbing him, pulling him into the pantry where no one would find us. But the sound of Tom's voice calling from the dining room snapped me back to reality. We were playing with fire, and we were getting too close to being caught. Later that night, as everyone sat on the couch watching a movie, Rob's knee brushed mine, and I felt that same thrill shoot through me. It was ridiculous. How could such a simple touch make me feel so alive, so wanted? But it did. The next time we were at a family gathering, the tension between Rob and me reached a breaking point. We were hosting dinner at our house, and Tom had just gone into the kitchen to grab drinks. I was standing near the hallway, trying to act casual, when I felt Rob come up behind me. His presence was unmistakable, his warmth sending shivers down my spine. He leaned in, his breath hot against my ear as he whispered, "You drive me crazy. You know that?" Before I could respond, his hand slipped under my dress, his fingers brushing the edge of my panties. My breath caught in my throat as I glanced toward the kitchen, where Tom was still rummaging through the fridge, completely oblivious to what was happening just feet away. "Rob, we can't," I whispered, but the words caught in my throat as his fingers tugged lightly at the waistband of my panties, pulling them down to my knees. Rob didn't stop. "I need you," he whispered, his voice hoarse with desire as his fingers slid between my thighs, teasing me with slow, deliberate strokes. Right here, right now. I knew we were being reckless. Tom was just in the next room and we could be caught at any moment, but the thought of that, the risk, only made it hotter. My body was on fire, every nerve lit up with anticipation as Rob's fingers slipped inside me, making me bite my lip to stifle a moan. "You're so wet," Rob murmured, his voice low and thick with arousal as his fingers moved inside me, his thumb circling that sensitive spot that made my knees weak. "You like this, don't you? Knowing he's just a few feet away?" His fingers kept moving inside me, drawing out every last bit of pleasure as I trembled in his arms, my breath coming in ragged bursts. I could barely think, barely breathe, as the heat of the moment consumed me. The cool air hitting my skin. My knees wobbled, and I pressed back against him, biting my lip. Just as I felt the thrill of the moment take over, we heard footsteps. My heart leapt into my throat as Tom's footsteps approached the door to the dining room. Rob quickly yanked my panties the rest of the way down, stuffing them into his pocket just as Tom walked back into the room. My heart pounded in my chest, my body still tingling with the illicit thrill of what had just happened. I tried to steady my breathing, hoping that my face didn't betray the tension swirling between Rob and me. Tom walked over, completely unaware of what had just transpired. "You guys okay?" he asked, casually holding up a couple of drinks. "I was wondering where you two disappeared to." I forced a smile, still trembling slightly, and tried to keep my voice steady. "Just talking," I replied, avoiding eye contact with Rob. Rob nodded, his face remarkably composed, but I saw the faintest hint of a smirk at the corner of his lips. "Yeah, we were just catching up," he added, his hand still in his pocket, holding onto my panties like a secret between us. Tom didn't seem to notice the tension in the air. He handed me a drink and I took it, grateful for something to hold on to, something to ground me in the moment. My heart was still racing, and my legs felt weak from both the rush of almost being caught and the intense encounter with Rob. We all returned to the dining room, and for a moment I thought we had gotten away with it. Rob and I exchanged a quick glance, his eyes glinting with amusement as if he was reveling in the thrill of our secret. But just as we sat down, something unexpected happened. As Rob settled into his chair, I saw it. The soft fabric of my panties slipping from his pocket and falling onto the floor, right next to the table. My breath caught in my throat, panic surging through me as I stared at the delicate lace now lying in plain view. My mind raced, trying to figure out what to do. I glanced at Tom, who was engrossed in a conversation with Megan, completely unaware. But it was only a matter of time before he looked down, or worse, someone else did. Rob saw it too. His eyes widened for a split second, but he acted quickly, bending down as if to adjust his shoe. With a swift, almost practiced motion, he grabbed the panties and stuffed them back into his pocket, his face perfectly composed by the time he straightened up. I exhaled, my heart still pounding in my chest as the danger of the moment passed. Rob gave me a sideways glance, a mischievous smile tugging at his lips. I could feel the heat rising in my cheeks, the lingering excitement of what we had just done, mixed with the terrifying possibility of being caught. The rest of the evening went by in a blur. I tried to focus on the conversation at the table, but my mind kept drifting back to what had happened. The feel of Rob's hands on me, the thrill of almost being caught. It was all I could think about. As the night wound down and everyone prepared to leave, Rob caught my eye one last time. He gave me a knowing smile, his hand casually brushing the pocket where my panties were still hidden. "We'll have to be more careful next time," he whispered as he passed by me, his voice low and filled with unspoken promises. I nodded, my body still buzzing from the tension of the evening, but deep down, I knew there would be a next time. Despite the danger, despite the guilt, I couldn't stop. The thrill, the connection, the way Rob made me feel, it was too intoxicating to give up. For weeks, the affair continued. Every stolen glance, every heated touch when no one was looking, it was all part of the dangerous game we were playing. The excitement was addictive, the risk only making it hotter. But then, something changed. It started with small things. A bit of nausea in the mornings, a fatigue I couldn't shake. At first, I thought it was just stress, the weight of living a double life finally catching up with me. But then, my period was late. I remember standing in the bathroom, staring down at the pregnancy test in my hand, my heart pounding as I waited for the result. The seconds dragged on, each one feeling like an eternity, until finally, the 2 pink lines appeared. Positive. I sank down onto the edge of the bathtub, my mind racing. I was pregnant, and there was no question in my mind who the father was. It wasn't Tom. It was Rob. Panic washed over me in waves. How could this have happened? What was I going to do? I couldn't tell Tom the truth. It would destroy him. Our marriage, already fragile, would shatter completely. And Rob? How would he react? What would this mean for us? For our families? But as the panic swirled inside me, a decision began to form in the back of my mind. There was only one way to protect everyone. To keep this secret buried. I would pretend. I would let Tom believe that this child was his. I would raise it as his, and Rob would never say a word. It was the only way. When I told Tom I was pregnant, his reaction was everything I had expected. He was overjoyed, his eyes filling with tears as he pulled me into his arms, thanking me, telling me how much he loved me, how this was the miracle we had been waiting for. I smiled, but inside, the guilt gnawed at me. Rob, on the other hand, knew immediately. The next time we were alone, he looked at me, his eyes filled with both wonder and dread. "It's mine, isn't it?" he asked quietly. I nodded, unable to meet his eyes. For a long moment, we just stood there in silence, the weight of what this meant hanging between us. "What are we going to do?" Rob asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "We're going to end this," I said, my voice trembling. "Tom can never know. He'll think it's his, and we'll move on." Rob nodded, the pain in his eyes clear. "I'll never say a word." And just like that, the affair came to an end. We stopped meeting in secret, stopped touching when no one was looking. We went back to pretending that nothing had happened, pretending that the child I carried was Tom's and not Rob's. 9 months later, I gave birth to a beautiful baby girl. Tom was ecstatic, and I played the part of the perfect wife, smiling through the guilt, pretending that everything was fine. But every time I looked into my daughter's eyes, I saw Rob staring back at me. And though the affair had ended, the secret we shared would never truly go away. It would always be there, lingering between us, a reminder of the choices we had made and the life we had built on lies. Thank you for watching Affair Confessions. If you enjoyed the story, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more captivating tales. Until next time, let the secrets unfold and the stories continue.